Hi everyone, I've made a big mistake. I don't even know where it all began, or when I started to become so careless. I've destroyed my once happy marriage because of my mistakes. I don't even know how I got here. Everything is on the verge of, I've made a huge mistake. Everything happened so fast, it was like a flash. I'm ashamed of myself right now. I've done something despicable. I can't even look at myself in the mirror. I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive myself for having an affair and cheating. I blame myself for everything. I got carried away by my lust and couldn't control myself. I'm confused and lost, but I hope that by sharing my story, someone might learn something. I ruined my marriage by having an affair with someone younger. My kids won't even talk to me. And the same is true of my other family members. My husband doesn't want me anymore and is saying he wants a divorce. You must be wondering what happened. So first, my backstory. My name is Fiona and I am a 45-year-old woman. I'm a 45-year-old woman and my husband Victor is 47. My husband and I have been married for 25 years and live in Alabama in the United States of America. We have 3 children, Ariel and Arthur, who are twins and are 23 years old, and Skylar, who is 19 years old. My husband and I were high school sweethearts and married a few years after we finished high school. My husband was the star quarterback and I was the nerd who was constantly bullied. That all stopped when he started protecting me. Throughout my last years in high school, I never got bullied. High school was tough again. I was the geek, always a target for bullies. Victor was the star quarterback. Everyone loved it. He seemed like he belonged in a different universe. Then out of the blue, we bumped into each other in the hallway. Victor started hanging out with me. He saw beyond the labels and liked me for me. As we spent time together, he became my shield against the bullies who had been making my life a misery. Victor stopped the bullying. He was like a force that made those jerks back off. I couldn't believe the star quarterback was choosing to be with me, just a regular girl trying to get by. Victor not only had my back, but showed me a world where kindness mattered more than cruelty. I found an unexpected ally and friend, and then a husband. I remember our first date. I was all jittery waiting for Victor to show up. I was 16 and he was soon to be 18 and done with high school. The vibe was like I was excited, but also a bit nervous when he finally arrived. He had this cute, shy smile that made me feel good. We started our date with a relaxed walk in the park where we chatted and shared some embarrassing and hilarious stories. It was clear that Victor genuinely cared about what I had to say. He made me feel important. We sat on a bench snacking on popcorn and watched the sunset. It felt like the start of something special. That first high school date turned into a memory I'll never forget. On our second high school date, Victor surprised me with this cool 2-seater bike. We had a great time riding the cedar bike around town, laughing like crazy. Afterwards, Victor suggested a picnic. We found a nice spot in the park, laid out a blanket, and enjoyed homemade sandwiches and snacks. It was just us enjoying good food and the simple pleasure of being carefree teenagers. As we sat there eating, I couldn't help but appreciate how thoughtful Victor was. Our second date was all about having a good time together and creating another great memory from our high school days. On our third date, Victor took me to this awesome secret spot of his, a place he really loved. We wandered off into quiet trails, away from the school environment and the chaos that comes with it. We found a little hideaway surrounded by nature. It felt like our own peaceful escape. Victor shared why this spot meant so much to him, making it seem like our personal little haven. Chilling in his favorite hideout, I could see how much Victor trusted me. He opened up about things he'd never told anyone else. His special place in our early 20s. Victor was 22 and I was 20. We decided to get married. We were already planning our wedding. College costs were a constant worry for us. Victor was studying medicine because he wanted to become a doctor. I was studying art because I was passionate about it. We had big dreams, but money was tight. We'd sit down and crunch the numbers, trying to figure out how to have a wedding without going broke. Nights were spent talking about our future, trying to balance our studies with the reality of becoming a married couple. It wasn't easy on our wallets, but our youthful hope and shared determination turned to growth. We faced a few challenges along the way, but we saw them as building blocks on our big day. Victor and I found ourselves in this cute little church, surrounded by familiar faces of close friends and family. The atmosphere was a mix of excitement and nerves, which made it clear that what we were doing was a pretty big deal. Walking down the aisle, I felt a rush of emotions. The simple setting of the church didn't detract from the fact that this moment was huge. It just made everything feel real and genuine. The church with its modest decorations perfectly matched the essence of our love. It was straightforward but deep with our favorite people around us. You could feel the joy and support in the air. There were nerves too. I was nervous, like there were a bunch of butterflies having a party in my stomach. It was totally normal though, given the promises we were about to make. When I stood up there with Victor and looked into his eyes, I felt at ease. Our vows were simple, but you could tell they came from the heart. They were a testament to the love that had grown from high school days to this day. After the party, it was a great time. Lots of toasts, laughter, and good times with our friends and family. Our wedding day might not have been a big deal, but it was special. Years later, we were in a really good place. We graduated, and Victor is now a very successful medical surgeon. He's always on call and available, which has been affecting our relationship. He doesn't even have time for me anymore. I got my art degree but never really used it. I chose to be a stay-at-home mom. At the end of the day, I'm not just a home mom. I chose to stay home and take care of the kids while Victor went out and worked. Besides, after Victor's dad died, he left Victor a sizable inheritance. We weren't struggling financially. We were in a very good place. Victor had everything set up in case he did retire. We wouldn't go broke or anything. He didn't even need to work, but he still kept working because the hospital needed him. He loved his job. He also set up a trust fund and college fund for all our kids, so we're in a good place financially. It had been a while since Victor and I had time to ourselves or were even intimate. Our marriage was suffering because he didn't have time for me. I should have just talked to him, but I was desperate for affection, so I cheated. I met Charles at the grocery store. I was at the grocery store. Yes, a grocery store. I had finished shopping for provisions and was on my way to the checkout when I bumped into him. I liked the way I had bumped into my husband back then in high school. Charles was young. He looked like he was only a few years older than my eldest kids, Ariel and Arthur, and he was very handsome. He apologized to me and offered to help me carry my stuff to the checkout and then to my car, but I refused again. He offered to help pay for my stuff, but I said no because he hadn't caused me or the items I bought any harm by bumping into him. I then checked out and left, but he kept following me. He told me his name was Charles, so I introduced myself. It was obvious he was trying to flirt with me, so I told him my age and that I was way older than him. He told me that he didn't mind because I was beautiful. People also compliment me a lot on it. Sometimes people tell me I look younger than I am, which is understandable since I take care of my skin and work out, but hearing it from someone as young as Charles made me happy because I was feeling emotionally neglected. I smiled and thanked him. I told him I was married, but Charles said it was okay because he just wanted to be friends. I knew that wasn't true, but I stayed and gave Charles my number anyway. Before I even got home, he had already started texting me. Charles and I were texting regularly, so I guess I did it because I was feeling pretty lonely with the kids away at college. Ariel and Arthur were in their first year while Skylar had graduated early from high school. I should mention that the kids were big fans of their dad. They were all studying medicine at college and had clearly taken their dad's brains and not my creative side. Ariel was studying to become a nurse while Arthur and Skylar were both studying to become medical surgeons. As a result, I was left alone at the house a lot, which made me really lonely. Charles and I were texting a lot and flirting. I guess I should have felt guilty, but I didn't because I felt it was harmless flirting and what Victor didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Charles and I did not. We had a lot in common. He wasn't into art, but he was more into music than I was. He also didn't like the kind of movies I liked, but that just brought us closer. I also found out that Charles was only 24, which was only a year older than Ariel and Arthur. I felt guilty, but I carried on anyway. Charles was determined. He also said that if I watched some of the movies he liked, I would like them too. He was also empathetic and would listen to me rant and talk endlessly. Now that I think about it, Charles was a bit of a red flag, but I was so starved for attention that I didn't even care to look. On top of that, Charles was a bit of a fake at first. He made me trust him, but when trouble came, he abandoned me. He was charismatic, so it was easy for him to pretend that he cared about me. Before long, I was smiling and laughing more, to the extent that my friends and even my kids and Victor noticed. But whenever they asked, I told them I just wanted to appreciate life more. Charles had a way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world to him. He knew how to get under a person's skin and into their heart. Soon, I was inviting Charles to the house when Victor was away. We'd watch movies together and then try to convince each other that our taste in movies was superior. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't care. I often tried to convince myself that I wasn't doing anything with Charles, even though I knew that it would. One day, Charles came over while Victor was away. Victor had said he wouldn't be back that night, so Charles and I decided to have a movie marathon all night, and then he'd leave really early in the morning. Victor was going to be back soon, so Charles came over, and we ended up watching a few movies on Netflix. I honestly don't know how it happened. It all happened really quickly, but before I knew it, Charles had kissed me, and we got intimate. It was only until the next day that it happened. It was around 3. It was 00 in the morning, and Victor still wasn't back. I figured he'd be back by 7 or 8. I finally realized what I'd done and kicked Charles out before he came back. I was horrified that I'd cheated on my husband. What would Victor say? What would he do? All those questions kept running through my mind. I felt guilty, but I also felt horrified because I had enjoyed it. I was so emotionally starved that I had cheated on my husband with a young boy who was only a year older than my twins. When my husband came back from the hospital, I felt so guilty, but I couldn't tell him because I knew he would divorce me and leave me. I didn't want that. I love my husband. My husband and I wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. He was kind, humble, and helpful, but he didn't like cheating at all. My husband believed in communication. He thought that if you had any issues, you should talk about them with your partner rather than going out and cheating. I pretended everything was fine and as if I didn't just cheat on my husband a few hours ago. We had a chat, and then Victor went to rest because he'd been working all night. I blocked Charles after sending him a quick message to never message me again, and everything was fine for a few days. After I'd blocked Charles, he called me a few times with some numbers before finally letting me be. I was starting to feel lonely, and I realized that Charles was the only person that made me not feel bored. He kept me entertained. I am also ashamed to admit it, but I missed the intimacy. After a few days of thinking it over, I finally unblocked Charles. He sent me a quick text, and we were talking again. Charles convinced me. He told me that what Victor didn't know wouldn't hurt him. As long as he never found out about the affair, we'd be safe. Charles said it would be easy to hide the affair because Victor worked a lot and was usually working on weekends. Also, my kids were in college, so it was just me and the house. Charles convinced me that I wasn't doing the strife. I was wrong to cheat on Victor because he was neglecting me. I fell for Charles's words, and soon we were having our secret affair in the house whenever Victor was away at the hospital on weekends. Charles would come over, and we would also be intimate. Charles also convinced me to start giving him money. Victor and I had a joint account, even though Victor was the one earning all the money. We were also well off, so I started giving Charles money for things like gas, groceries, clothes, and other stuff. I became so engrossed in the affair and so involved that I think I lost myself. Victor must have started to suspect because he started coming home randomly. That should have been a wake-up call for me, but I still ignored it. I was so deep in with Charles that I just couldn't stop. One day, I and Charles were in the middle of being intimate when I heard Victor's car pull up to the driveway. I was shocked because Charles and I had agreed that Victor wasn't supposed to be home by this time. I immediately got dressed and arranged the bed. I had to hide Charles in one of our kids' rooms since our kids had gone off to college. Their rooms were mostly in use nowadays, but they still had all their stuff from childhood and they usually stayed in. I kept the rooms clean for whenever they came to visit. Thankfully, Victor didn't think to check the kids' room. I guess he didn't want me to know he was suspecting me, so he acted normally and stayed home all day. Charles couldn't leave and had to spend the night in the kids' room. The next day, however, when Victor had left, Charles came out to go to work after spending the night there. He hadn't eaten much, so I let him bathe and eat breakfast with me. We then started getting intimate. That was my mistake. I should have just sent Charles home after breakfast instead of getting intimate with him again. I think Victor must have really suspected me because he came right back to the house and caught me and Charles right in the act of getting intimate. Have you ever seen your life flash right before your eyes? That's exactly what happened to me the moment Victor dashed into our matrimonial bed and caught me and Charles together. I was so shocked. I quickly covered myself with the bed sheets and started crying. Charles's clothes were on the floor, so Victor grabbed them and refused to give them to him. He then kicked Charles out naked. I just watched everything unfold, realizing that I had ruined my life. Victor didn't even scream at me, which I found even more horrifying. I really wanted him to have a reaction, to say something to me, to scream at me, to ask me, how could I? I just wanted him to have a reaction, but he didn't. He threw Charles's clothes in me and then left the house, even though I kept calling him to come back and let me explain. I cried for hours on end. What had I done? I had ruined my life. There was no going back from here. My marriage, which I had struggled so hard to build, was gone. I knew there was no way Victor would forgive me. I had scarred him for life. Victor was going to leave me, and I knew that I would go down. I had no source of income on my own and no assets. I suddenly regretted the decision I had made to be a stay-at-home mom. At that moment, I realized that I had made a mistake. I was a housewife for all those years. Victor didn't even waste time in telling everyone what I had done. I was even more horrified by the way he had told everyone about my betrayal and cheating. I got a notification on my phone that Victor had added me to a group chat on WhatsApp with my family, our friends, and his family. It was as if I had a feeling of what he was about to do. I tried calling him, but he wouldn't pick up. Then he posted screenshots of my messages with Charles. Then he did a voice note about how he had come into the house and caught me and Charles in the act. My phone started buzzing. Everyone was blowing up my phone. I was getting text messages about how I could have done something so horrible and about how I had ruined my marriage. My parents were so disappointed. My friends were disappointed and shocked. Victor's family was enraged. I guess Victor didn't want our kids to find out by someone else telling them, so he called them and told them. I only know that because soon after my kids were calling me. At first, I was too scared to pick up, but I knew if I didn't, they'd come over to the house. Facing them in person would be even more horrifying than talking to them on the phone. So I picked up the phone. My kids were shocked and disappointed in me. I tried to give them an excuse saying I was lonely and that's why I did it, but they weren't hearing it. They told me why I haven't spoken to them since. They told me that Victor was planning to retire soon and that I'd ruined my life. My kids didn't want to talk to me anymore. Even Victor's family were angry at what I'd done. I thought Victor and I were happy together. I tried calling him a few times, but he didn't answer. So I sent him a lot of texts explaining why I did it, apologizing and telling him I had felt so lonely, but Victor wouldn't hear any of it. He told me he knew how lonely I was. He said he'd been planning to retire, but hadn't told me because he wanted it to be a surprise. I couldn't believe it. He also told me he'd been suspecting I was cheating on him, which is why he'd started coming home randomly. He said I was given just a few days to pack my things and leave his house, and he said he'd come to get the divorce papers to sign. I had to pack up and go to my parents' house because even though they were angry with me, they'd never abandoned me in my time of need. As for Charles, he blocked me. I can't even get a hold of him. It's like he never existed. I know what I did was wrong and I'm regretting it. I'll regret it for the rest of my life, but I'm hoping that by posting here, someone might see this and learn a lesson from my mistake. Thanks for listening. I'm currently regretting every decision I've ever made. Hello, Redditors. I've always loved this platform. Now that everything in my life is falling apart, I feel like it's a good time to share my situation here. I'm hoping that by sharing my story, I hope to help others avoid making the same mistake I made in my marriage. Temptation is something we should all avoid for a few minutes of fun. I ruined my marriage, which took years to build, and I lost every sense of stability. I cheated on my husband with a younger student of mine at the college where I lecture. This singular mistake has currently torn apart my entire life. I know you're probably wondering about what happened and how it happened, so let me give you my backstory first. My name is Serena, and I am a 45-year-old woman. I'm 45, and my husband Mike is 46. Mike and I have been married for 23 years and have two great kids, Damon and Rend. Damon is 21 and Rend is 19. They're both at college at the moment. Mike and I first met at university. We first crossed paths in the hustle and bustle of the university library, which is that place where the air is thick with the smell of old books and dreams of the future. I was knee-deep in my love affair with literature, lost in the magic of words sprawled across the pages. Mike, this curious guy with a spark dark in his eye, noticed me engrossed in my reading. Our initial interactions were more like quiet smiles and shared glances amidst the sea of books. Slowly but surely, our late-night coffee breaks turned into conversations. I used to steal glances at Mike during lectures. They were the highlight of my day. When I started college, I was all about being super serious. I had no time for romance, just books and lectures. That was my plan, but then along came Mike. He was a great guy, happy, kind, and the whole package. At first, I didn't see it, but Mike was persistent. Mike was really persistent. He could turn a bad day into something special with his laugh. He made life feel lighter, like he had a secret to enjoying every moment. Mike seemed to have cracked the code of happiness. He always had that infectious smile, and he had a gentle and kind aura that melted away my walls. At first, I tried to keep my distance, reminding myself of my initial commitment to academia. I tried to stick to my rule of no love, just study, but Mike's easygoing vibe and genuine joy started to break down my defenses. He had this magical power to turn seriousness into laughter and make Mike made every day a bit brighter. He was like a persistent ray of sunlight, warming his way into my heart and turning gloomiest days into joyous adventures. Gradually, I found myself drawn to his easygoing nature and the simple joy he found in every moment. It was as if he held the key to a world where seriousness was replaced by laughter and warmth. The key to replacing seriousness with laughter and warmth was love. Despite my best efforts, it found its way in, and suddenly my heart wasn't following the academic script I had planned. The strict study-only policy I had set for it was suddenly a thing of the past. Mike's charm flipped my college journey into an unexpected adventure. Laughter, warmth, love, it all happened. It was a surprise that made those study-only intentions fly right out the window against my initial resolve. I started to see the beauty in letting someone in. Our first date wasn't your usual fancy dinner or movie night. Mike decided we should have a spontaneous picnic in the park at sunset. We went to the park at sunset, which might sound clean, but trust me, Mike had a talent for making the ordinary super special. We walked through the park carrying blankets and a basket filled with all sorts of snacks. Mike's excitement rubbed off on me and I couldn't help but get into the spirit. We found a spot under a big oak tree. We found a great spot under a tree. What made the picnic really special was the surprise element. Instead of regular sandwiches, Mike brought out a mix of international snacks, Thai noodles, French pastries, and some weird fruit I couldn't pronounce. It was like a mini world tour for our taste buds right there on the blanket. As we enjoyed the snacks, Mike regaled us with hilarious stories that had us both in stitches. He had a knack for turning everyday occurrences into something funny. Time seemed to stand still, just the two of us, with the sound of leaves and distant city noise. Then we had an impromptu dance party with just Mike and I in attendance. It was quite the experience. Mike pulled out a tiny speaker and a sweet tune started playing. He grinned and, like a pro, asked me to dance. We twirled around under the stars, laughing and having a blast. It felt like a scene from a feel-good movie. But wait, there was more. Mike handed me a small fancy-looking package. I opened it to find a glow-in-the-dark. I'm not sure what happened next, but I ended up going in the water. Mikey remembered me mentioning how I like playing frisbee in the evenings. He turned it into a surprise, which was really sweet. We ended up throwing the frisbee in the semi-darkness, catching and laughing like crazy. We didn't care if we looked silly. It was about enjoying the moment together. I remember thinking, this is the kind of date you remember forever. It was a date you'd remember forever as the night went on. We lay on the blanket, looking at the stars. Mike shared his dreams and I shared mine. It was a level of honesty and connection that felt real. Our first date wasn't just fun. It was a sneak peek into the kind of relationship where you can truly be yourself. I went home that night with a heart full of laughter and a glow in the frisbee in the dark and this incredible feeling that I just had the best time. Mike had this way of making a regular evening into an unforgettable adventure. I remember feeling that this was the kind of person I'd want to spend the rest of my life with. Deciding to tie the knot before completing college was a bold move, but for Mike and me, it felt like the right thing to do. Mike's parents were surprisingly laid back and adored me, despite being well off. My family couldn't get enough of Mike, so despite the unconventional timing, we got married. We didn't want a grand affair. We opted for a small church ceremony with only a handful of people invited. Some people were surprised given Mike's wealthy background, but what they didn't know was that it was exactly what I wanted. Something private and intimate. Walking down the aisle in that small church, the air felt charged with excitement and a bit of disbelief. The intimate setting, surrounded by our closest loved ones, made it feel like it was just us. We promised each other forever and Mike's parents were the coolest, most easygoing people ever. They cheered us on while my family beamed with joy. Our vows were exchanged in a space filled with love and support, far away from the grandeur one might expect from a family with Mike's financial standing. The choice for a more modest celebration wasn't about avoiding extravagance. It was all about authenticity and the simplicity of our commitment to each other. The reception that followed was a cozy gathering filled with laughter, shared stories, and heartfelt toasts. It wasn't the opulent affair one might associate with a wealthy family, but it was perfect for us. We danced, laughed, and celebrated the start of our journey together, surrounded by the warmth of our closest friends and family. Some people might have thought it was a bit impulsive to get married before finishing college, but for us it was a declaration of love and commitment that defied societal expectations. Love knows no perfect timing. Looking back, our small wedding in that quiet church remains a cherished memory. It wasn't about the size of the guest list or the extravagance of the event. It wasn't about the guest list or the extravagance of the event. It was about two people choosing each other, surrounded by the love of those who mattered most. In that simplicity, we found the foundation for our love story. You know, they say you never know what you have until it's gone. I never knew how precious and important Mike was to me until I lost him, all because Mike and I had a lot of fun together during that period of transition from college to the next stage of our lives. As graduation approached, we were heading in different directions, driven by our unique dreams. I was determined to become a teacher. It wasn't just a job, it was a passion. I wanted to be in a classroom, helping students to grow. Mike, on the other hand, had a more laid-back approach to college. When he was at college, he was set to take over the family business and become the CEO. He also had a trust fund waiting for him. College was more about the experience, the parties, the friendships, and the whole shebang. Our talks about life after college highlighted the gap between our plans. I was all about education and wanted to make a difference in the lives of students. Mike, on the other hand, was cool with life unfolding naturally and knew his future was something.